Welcome to Night Shifts. Jeff Sharon and Andrew Glukov with you here on this Wednesday, May the 10th. We've got a lot going on that we're going to be talking about. So we're doing this thing in stages, recording this thing kind of throughout the day as news comes in. We had a lot of news coming yesterday. Of course, we have softball going into the American Athletic Conference tournament, single elimination, much to my chagrin. Eric Lopez will join us later to talk about that. We've got women's golf in the NCAAs. Bryson will be in later to talk about that. Of course, baseball moving its way through. Track and field. We also have an interview with that Kyle Nash had with former UCF receiver Rannell Hall, who's with the Arlington Renegades of the XFL. He's playing for an XFL championship this weekend, so we'll get to hear from Speedy on his chase for a title in the XFL. We had several UCF players in the XFL this year, Drew, but Speedy managed to latch on, and he's been a key offensive contributor for Arlington, as we'll talk about. We're going to talk about UCF football first, and a quick little recruiting note that actually dropped in, or actually a couple of recruiting notes that dropped in. First of all, and I think most interestingly, Drew, from the transfer portal, in comes a quarterback, Xavier Williams. He was previously at Charlotte, another South Georgia kid. And he has announced that he's coming in to UCF. I'm pulling up his stats here. Williams was recruited originally interestingly enough, as a pro-style quarterback out of Colquitt County in South Georgia. Saw some action for the 49ers. He's listed at 6'2", 200 pounds. Still has 3 years of eligibility remaining. Saw his most action against Maryland back on September the 10th in garbage time duty, but he was 19 of 35 for 191, 2 touchdowns, no picks in that game. For the season, 34 of 67, a shade over 50%, 420 yards, 2 TDs, 2 picks. But this was a really interesting get, because I think this is the first indication that we've had of what Darin Hinshaw wants to do at the quarterback position. Of course, with Tommy Castellanos moving on, I always felt like Tommy was more of a run-first guy. Williams is more on the pass-first side. So what does this, Andrew Glukov, tell you about where UCF's quarterback position is post John Rice Plumlee?
Well, we saw signs before, even before Hinshaw got hired. Dylan Risk is more of a pass-first quarterback, freshman. This is a very low-risk move. You have 3 years of eligibility. This is still a very young guy, a lot of room for development, and you can kind of make him your own. What probably helped steer him to UCF is his former coach, Will Healy, is an assistant and analyst at UCF now. So you got let go from Charlotte. He got hired down here. I think that played a role, because he did get a couple of offers to go elsewhere. And he knows he's not coming here to start this year. And I think that's what a lot of fans don't really understand is you're going through the portal, you're talking to players. They know they're not starting this year. So if you've got guys who are seniors or top-end players, they're not going to come here. They know they're not going to start. They already have a starting quarterback. John Rice Plumlee has that position locked down. Just accept it. That's just reality. So now it's about building depth and planning for the future. Because you have Timmy McClain, who's probably going to be your number 2 guy, and then you have Risk and this guy who they both have room to grow. I mean, one's a true freshman, one's a redshirt sophomore. A lot of youth there, and this is part of the roster management juggling. Is you have to always be planning for ahead. But I think it's overall not a bad move. It's definitely low risk.
I was really I agree with you on all that. I think there's obviously the need for quarterback depth was key. I'm interested in how this kind of moves, the quarterback position over from, away, toward a little bit more pass first, like we were saying. Do you think that there's a possibility that, obviously with Williams there, I mean, Charlotte got him obviously thinking that he was that he was going to be in the mix for them. He was the number 30 ranked quarterback according to ESPN when he came out of South Georgia. Does he seem like he could have the inside track to the starting job in 2024 and beyond?
I wouldn't go that far.
Okay.
I think all bets are off at this point. It's going to be strictly on how that development comes along. From an experience standpoint, you're looking at McClain as your guy, but that's what this year is all about. Is about building that experience up and install that new offense, which they've been working on throughout the spring.
Yeah, and like we saw in the spring game too, is like the whole idea of keeping the quarterback in the pocket as well. Like we saw with JRP when he was in there. I think this is going to be that to me was the biggest change that I saw. From one year to the other with Darin working with the quarterbacks is increased patience in the pocket.
And the footwork.
And the footwork. You were exactly right.
I mean, I remember they were showing a little video clip of some of the drills, and then fans online were kind of laughing at it. But you know what? Those drills matter. Footwork was a major difference between what we saw at the end of last year and what we saw towards spring practice into the spring game. Major improvement. I think Hinshaw is taking a very hands-on approach of teaching these fundamental skills, and I think he's really embracing his role at his alma mater.
Mm-hmm. So on the other side of the ball, another transfer that came in or is reportedly coming in, and this just broke this morning from listed originally from Washington State, but really spent most of his time at Incarnate Word. Isaiah Paul, he's a linebacker out of San Antonio, Texas. Redshirt senior, so he's a grad transfer, 6'2", 232. This guy was a top 10 tackler for Incarnate Word over the course of his first 3 years and has been battling some injury problems since. Originally planned to go to Washington State and enroll for spring of 2023. Looks like it didn't work out over there, so he decided to go back into the portal and is now coming to UCF. We've talked before about the need for linebacker depth. To what extent do you think Isaiah Paul helps that out?
I mean, it doesn't hurt. UCF's first unit for linebacking is probably the strongest defensive unit on the field at this point. You've got Johnson back, you've got Yates back. And this is a really solid first unit, and then the depth starts to drop off. So he's going to slide in. He's got 1 year of eligibility. He'll probably get in on the rotation. Do I think he's going to be a huge contributor? Hard to say. I mean, injuries are a question.
Mm-hmm.
Last year was rough, but I mean, he did pretty well in prior years. He takes up important depth and in a good way.
Yeah. So how are you feeling right now overall about UCF in the portal? I mean, there's always that lag, right? And I think that's the part that I wish I could tell fans more about is
you have to give away.
You got to go into the portal first before you can come out of it, right? So there's always going to be that lag of, oh my God, we're losing all these guys, but then, oh my God, we're getting all these guys, right? And I think that the getting of guys is much slower over time because they're going to go through a recruiting process and more staggered than guys who go through the who maybe go through their they go through spring ball, maybe they complete their degree, then it seems like they're all announcing at the same time that they're going into the portal. It's like in the NFL where free agency hits at midnight on whatever it hits, I forget, and everyone's a free agent all of a sudden. And it's like and there's like a free for all, and then all of a sudden the signings kind of trickle in. So that's the same situation that we're in now with college. But how do you feel right now about where UCF stands in the portal acquisition phase?
There was a chart that was posted online some time ago comparing the value of talent lost versus the value of talent gained in the portal. And UCF ranked in the top 10 in talent gained, net talent. UCF has gained a lot more than they've lost in the portal over the years. Think about it. How many starters has UCF lost in the few years since the portal started? It's a handful, but it's not a large number. They've gained more starters. You look at the wide receivers. You lost, Ryan O'Keefe. He was a starter. Jalen Robinson was a starter. He kind of just disappeared and fell off at Ole Miss. But you gained Kobe Hudson. You gained Javon Baker. You actually got better at the position than if you held serve.
Yeah.
Look at running backs. R.J. Harvey, when Isaiah Bowser came in, and those are transfers in. DeMarcus Bowman, transfer in, compared to what you brought in on your own or lost through the portal. Who's the worst thing they lost in the portal? Kadarian Richardson? When you look at, at the talent that's come out and come in as an overall, UCF's come up ahead, and that's attributed to the work that the coaching staff does. Do they need work on bringing in freshmen? Yes, they do. It's not good enough. It's getting better, and they're reaching new heights every year. Joining the conference and everything. But in order to be competitive in the conference, they need to do better. And they're working towards it. But being a masterful work in the portal will help in the short term and fill in holes and other areas that they're not hitting right, like offensive line. The recruiting aspect from freshmen's been rough. They've been fixing it within the portal. Look how many starters they've gotten through the portal over the last couple of years. Enough said. Same thing with your other skill positions. Linebacker is a huge one where the portal has saved that position. Even defensive back, Devon Wilson was a transfer here. A lot of these great guys that we kind of eventually just kind of took for granted as being one of us had to come from somewhere else, and then a lot of them came from another school.
I kind of have two thoughts on it. I think the first thought is you mentioned, you got to do better on freshman recruiting, but and that's true. But I'm okay with the strategy of we got to hit the portal now, because when you're jumping from the American to the Big 12, and I've told people this all the time, this is the biggest conference jump we've ever made.
Oh, by far.
This is bigger than, independent to the MAC, MAC to CUSA, CUSA to the Big East / America. This is a much bigger jump in terms of talent level. So you need grown men in here. You need guys who are grown men that you can plug in and play right away to make up for the size differential and the depth differential that you're going to have. So that's the first point. The second point I thought on it was, I'm okay with the idea. I think people worry a little bit too much about the production of the incoming transfers, because you see guys who were productive for us move on to other places. Like Dylan Gabriel's a good example, right? Obviously a clearly productive player. Ryan O'Keefe, a clearly productive player. The players who come into UCF have had limited playing time, but that's okay. I think that's sort of the difference there is these guys are moving up, and they're either moving up or moving laterally, because they're coming from places where they were really talented, but maybe got stuck in the depth, but maybe got shuffled in the depth chart a little bit. Or if they're moving, laterally over from like Javon Baker, I think is a really good example. There was a lot of talent on that field for Auburn. He figured he could come here and be much more productive, and has been much more productive for UCF than he was at his previous stop. So, you can look at that and say, well, we're getting all these guys who are, I hear fans sometimes say, oh, these guys are just, quote, cast-offs, end quote. That doesn't mean they're not talented players. It just means that they're looking for playing time, and they're getting it here, and it turns out they're pretty good.
Yeah, and not only that, but in some cases that's flat out not true. Kobe Hudson was the team leader for Auburn in receiving when he went to the portal.
Right.
I mean, you knew the guy had talent. Now, Javon Baker didn't have much from a stat standpoint, but you know what? Numbers don't mean all that much, as we've seen. The guy can ball. He's proven it, and I had him pegged as my breakout guy last year, and he certainly did not disappoint.
Yeah.
And I have high expectations for him this year to have an encore. But look at some of the guys that came in. Jason Johnson, was highly touted out of the FCS level. Walter Yates had a good resume coming in. I mean, these are players.
Those guys all worked.
They all worked. Even Jarvis Ware had good numbers out of Missouri before he got hurt. These are players that had results, that had put in the work and had a resume. They're not just cast-offs. People leave for various reasons. We have to understand that. There could be a coaching change. There could be just a desire for something different. Or
even a coordinator change and a system change, right?
Yeah, like it could be really. Every player has a story, and we have to respect the fact that they're there. They're leaving for a reason. One wanted to play for another coach. One is a grad transfer, wants to try something different, wants to go somewhere different, have a different experience. You know what? I'm cool with that. Everyone, this is their life. They want to make the best of it. Go take care of yourself. Go make pretend money. Go do whatever you got to do.
That's the thing that also I always come back to is if they weren't football players, right? Or athletes of any kind for that matter, to what extent was it a big deal if a guy transferred,
Oh, not at all. I
went to graduate school. I went to UCF for my undergrad and then went to graduate school at a different institution. Like in theory, like if I was a football player in the era of the transfer portal, even though I wasn't, then it would be, when my time at my undergrad was over and I got my degree, I would have been like, hey, everybody, I'm going in the portal, respect my decision. And then I end up at another institution. Everyone's like, oh, this guy's going in the portal.
Everyone has something to complain about. Yeah, I think.
Well, it's not even that. It's like, put aside the fact that these guys are ball players, right?
Well, they're people.
They're people. And as students, they have the ability and the right to transfer to a place that they deem to be a better fit, and they're legal adults. They can make that decision.
I do like the fact that there's windows now, where you can't just up and up, whenever you feel like it.
Yeah.
Remember, the scholarship is basically an agreement between the player and the school. You know what?
And it's a 1 year agreement.
It's a 1 year agreement. Now,
that's what everyone forgets.
Now, it may be said, oh, it's going to be a 4 year. We'll just, we'll renew it every year and rubber stamp it. It's still technically a 1 year thing. They just have committed to giving you 4 years on that scholarship. But It's still 1 year, and they rubber stamp it. So 1 year, you play the season, they give you the scholarship. Then, you know what? It is certainly your right to take your ball and move on somewhere else. But, while they're taking care of you, you got to take care of them. And I think that's a fair expectation between the player and the school. I think that's fair. Outside of the one season, a lot of fans want consistency. Well, you know what? This is also business. This is we're seeing the business aspect. Players, their brand is their value. They have to go where they feel they can maximize themselves and be happy. And you know what? If it's not here, if it's not there, okay, that's your right as a player. I think fans sometimes forget that there's a business aspect. The coaches, the staff, they may work hard for the team while they're there, but it's a job. I remember people were upset with Danny White not scheduling UCF after he left. Well, guess what? his time at UCF was ended. That was the end of the job. Sure, he wants them to do well, but he doesn't owe them anything. He now has a new job with new focus, new requirements, and priorities. Same thing with players. This is a job to them too. Your job is to go play football and win games, and we the school are giving you the ability to get a degree in exchange. So there's a business agreement here. So guess what? It's a job. It may not be school employee, which would open a whole can of worms, but it's still a job. Say what you want.
Yeah.
So we have to respect the fact that there's a business aspect of it. And unlike the fans who invest money into the program, players aren't like that. They are their own brand. They're not investing in UCF brand. They're investing in, John Rice Plumlee brand.
Well, they're investing. They are investing in the school's brand through what they're doing, right? There's some extent to that.
Well, like when he was at Ole Miss, his brand, investing in his brand, aligned with Ole Miss. Then he left. Now it aligns with UCF. So it's like you changing jobs. It's no different. You work hard on yourself, and that you do the best job you can makes the company you work for look good, and you're making yourself look good in the process too. It's no different.
Power to the people. All right, moving on to some other football news. We have a former UCF player going for a championship this weekend. Y'all remember Rannell Speedy Hall, who is on UCF in the 2013-2014 era? Well, he's still in pro ball, and he's playing for the Arlington Renegades of the XFL, and they have made it to the XFL championship game. They will play Saturday, 8 p.m. on ABC and ESPN Plus against the DC Defenders for the XFL championship. This, of course, is the Rocks League that, remember, back in 2020, the then Dallas Renegades were part of the league, but Rannell was with the Tampa Bay Vipers. That league was cut short due to COVID, but they restarted it this year. Of course, the Orlando Guardians were here in town. I was their PA announcer for a little bit. Terrence Plummer was on that team. And we get to see Rannell Hall as a kick returner, wide receiver, and part-time running back for the Arlington Renegades, head coached by Bob Stoops, interestingly enough, go for a championship. And Rannell actually spent some time with Kyle Nash earlier this week previewing the XFL championship. And here's some snippets of the conversation between Kyle and Rannell.
Rannell, how you doing? This is Kyle Nash. I'm with the three-point conversion, but I also write for the Black and Gold Banneret. So go Knights. I had to throw that in there. Probably only
nice.
Only a matter of time before you and I cross paths with that in mind. But to throw that in there, first of all, we were talking to Donald Payne earlier. He said that kind of the key to you guys getting that championship win was getting hot at the right time. What do you think was that spark that got you to over the hump and into take the Roughnecks out and become South Division champions?
I just pretty much what we've been emphasizing the whole week during practice, just pretty much everyone playing a full, perfect game. Of course, it's the game of football. There are going to be MEs, MAs, and mistakes. But like our coach always say, if everyone's on the same page and that's physical, mindset, mentality, we're going to go out there and we're going to perform to our best. So I think that was a key thing, coming into last week's game.
Kind of asking a question that's kind of a bigger picture concept. You're a guy that's played for a number of different leagues in different spots. I remember even some time with the AAF, even if I remember correctly there.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
What do you think is different about the XFL and your experience there? And what is it that stands out to you that you kind of enjoyed more in your XFL experience here?
Definitely that sticks out more is the support from the fans. The fan base is much bigger, and also with the XFL, having the names behind it, the Rockets behind it. That's pretty much every kid's idol growing up. So, just his brand being behind it, the Under Armour brand, I think that plays a big, tremendous part, in fans, rallying and tuning into our games.
You mentioned in 2013 and all that, you kind of have a unit of UCF being fancy, as it were. How does it feel to have that essential, kind of that essential, be part of that essential
It feels great, man. To make history with the school and like a big thing nowadays, the new coaches who came in, the players, one thing that the coaches stand on is making sure they're very knowledgeable on to where this program is today and how it got there. So it's always home every time we go back. Every time I go back, I've been back to UCF recently. The players know I am. Like, hey, you're Speedy, aren't you? You know what I'm saying? It's a good feeling, just to know they know where the program came from. So it's a great feeling, man.
I mean, a guy named Speedy playing next to Adrian Killens, at least for part of the season this year, is a sight for anybody who's playing UCF. And the last UCF thing I'll bring into this conversation, the painting behind me is an Aaron Evans original. So I'll leave that at that. There.
Oh, dope. That's what's up. That's dope, man. I like it.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
All right. Thanks again to Rannell, and thanks also to Andy Seeley for helping us out on that sound. Of course, shout out to Kyle, who's a little under the weather. Couldn't join us to talk a little bit more about this. But again, the XFL Championship game at the Alamo Dome in San Antonio, Texas, Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern on ABC and ESPN+. It'll be Rannell and his Renegades taking on the DC Defenders, who are the best team in the league in the regular season at 9-1. Their only loss to the Orlando Guardians. All right. Let's move on to goings-on in Tampa this weekend, and for that, we turn it over to Eric Lopez and Bryson Turner.
All right, welcome back here. This is Night Shift. Eric Lopez and Bryson Turner. As we're both, depending on when you're listening and watching this, we're either preparing to leave to go to Tampa or we're in Tampa. It depends on your perspective. Me and Bryson, alongside our very own Nick Porcelli, will be in Tampa this week. Bryson and Nick will be there the entire week. I'll be going back and forth from Tampa to Orlando to cover the American Conference Softball Championships and the American Track and Field Championships. We're going to break both of those events down here in Tampa. Plus, we'll also break down the end of the UCF golf season. Bryson will break that down, Bryson. But this is exciting, Bryson. You got your bags here. You're packing. I'm packing. We just, it's kind of wild here. We're taking the show on the road.
Honestly, considering that the big, we don't really know where these championships are going to take us in the Big 12 and how feasible it is to travel to these championships. So considering these final AAC championships for softball and track are going to be right down I-4, it only makes sense to take advantage of them because these could potentially be the last conference championships that are within a feasible traveling distance for us for quite a while. The only other time I could see it happening in the future is with the tennis championships, but right. I think that would take some time.
Correct. Certainly that's valid. Baseball will be in Clearwater later in the month. But let's get into it. Softball, some news. Obviously, UCF will play Memphis 12:30 the start time, 12:30 Eastern. They've moved the start times up due to weather concerns in Tampa, of course. I would argue that's 1 week too late because UCF comes in as the 2 seed. Their RPI as of Monday was 41, which has some people concerned. They're right on the bubble. There's the bracket. If you're watching, Bryson has it up there, his American Conference softball bracket. We expense no budget in here. But the Knights play Memphis. They just swept Memphis, Bryson, up in Memphis, all 3 games. But the problem was it hurt UCF. UCF went from 33 in the RPI to 41, in part because Memphis is in the 200s in the RPI. So the UCF schedule strength got hurt. It went from 40 to 64. Their average RPI win went from 112 to 126. This is why I'm anti-computers deciding stuff, because they are clueless. But it's put the Knights in a little bit of a peculiar situation where they need to get some wins this weekend. I think they got to get to the final to feel comfortable about making the NCAA tournament. They got to get off to a good start against Memphis, who they just played, which is always bizarre that you just played a team 3 straight times, Bryce, and now they got to play them a 4th.
Yes, it is a very, I want to say odd situation a little bit, but I think it also comes with the fact that playing a team back-to-back times is such a mixed bag, because you think that after facing Memphis these last few times, UCF was like, all right, we got a handle on him. But that also gives Memphis 3 times to be like, okay, here's what we did wrong.
Right.
And this is what we could do right the last time. I still remember the tennis last year where they played USF in the final regular season match and beat them, and then lost in the opening round of the American Athletic Conference Championship to the Bulls. I believe it was the women's team last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
it's tricky.
4 times.
It's tricky.
It's a very tricky thing to do, and it would just be, and in this type of situation, a loss here would be devastating to the
Well, here's the good news. This is why I'm excited to go to the Big 12. In the Big 12, you don't have to worry about teams in the 200s RPI hurting your resume. So that's a positive for the future. Unfortunately, we're not there yet. Yeah, no, it's concerning. I think, like I said, you look at the bracket, UCF's the 2, Memphis is the 7. The winner plays the winner. South Florida's the 3. East Carolina's the 6. South Florida's the host, Bryson. So you look at their bracket, they got to open with Memphis, then potentially going to have to play South Florida at their park, basically a road game, although hopefully there are a lot of Knight fans to upset that. But they're going to be playing them with a trip to the finals on the line, and that's where it gets tricky because if South Florida were to beat UCF, that could really make things murkier for UCF in the NCAA tournament. They would have to root for Wichita State or somebody, I think, to knock off USF so that USF doesn't steal their bid. So hopefully it doesn't get to that. Wichita's the top seed. They get the bye as a result of winning the regular season title. Personally, I think conferences like the Americans should put a bye to the top 2 seeds to help them help become a multiple B league consistently in the America. But that's a whole other story for another time. Wichita's the top seed. They'll play the winner of Tulsa and Houston, which will be the early morning game to start off that tournament on Thursday there. So I think for the Knights, get to the final, and I feel good about going to the tournament. Probably a 3 seed in Tallahassee with Florida State hosting, possibly playing Florida or an Auburn type as a 2 seed in Tallahassee. So it's going to be a tough road either way for the Knights, but they're battle-tested. They've played a tough schedule. And Bryson, they had some big awards on Wednesday. Sarah Willis, the headliner, winning American Conference Pitcher of the Year award, becoming the 3rd Knight pitcher to win Pitcher of the Year, joining Mackenzie Otis, who did it in 2012 in CUSA, and Shelby Turnier in 2015 in the American. This also makes it 7 out of 8 years that the American has had either a UCF pitcher or a USF pitcher win Pitcher of the Year. So that streak continues there. She was first team all-conference. UCF had 8 players in their all-conference awards acknowledged there, Bryce. So what stood out to you on the awards?
It's what stood out to me is that, I remember you just singing the praises of Chloe Evans this entire season, and yet we don't see her in the first team? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I was a little perplexed by that myself. Let me read you off who UCF got awarded. Sarah Willis, first team all-conference pitcher. Jada Cody, catcher, first team all-conference, 3rd straight year first team for Jada Cody. Shannon Doherty, remember Bryson last year? She got shafted, didn't make all-conference at all. This year, first team all-conference, so I'm really happy for her that she got acknowledged. Michaela Macario, first team all-conference at second base. Kennedy Searcy, first team all-conference in the outfield. I would have put her in that DP non-pitcher slot over Bree Cantu, and that could have perhaps created space for Chloe Evans, but they didn't do that. Haley Morgan of Tulsa, Addison Barnard, and Lauren Lucas of Wichita State both got the outfield nods over Chloe. I agree with you. Chloe should have been in there, to say the least. So those are the first teamers for UCF. Second team for UCF, Jasmine Williams makes it in the infield at second team. So does Aubrey Evans. Aubrey Evans does not win Rookie of the Year. That goes to Wichita freshman Alex Aguilar, the pitcher, who gets acknowledged there. Chloe Evans, as you mentioned, makes second team all-conference. I think Grace Jewell should have been a second team all-conference pitcher I would have picked her over potentially a Lauren Howe or a Kylie Nash. They kind of did some things there to move Nash to more of a DP two-way role player, but it is what it is. Those are conference awards. Wichita State staff won the Coach of the Year award. Sydney McKinney, no surprise, won Player of the Year for them. And then Kathy Garcia Soto of USF, Sammy Hood of Wichita State shared Defensive Player of the Year. So those are the awards there. But look, it's about the field right now for the Knights here, Bryson. And This is a stressful week. They need to take care of business. The best case scenario, win the tournament, go out on top in the American, and you can celebrate on Sunday night, relax, and watch the selection show. If you lose in the final to Wichita State, not great, but you're feeling you're still probably in. You lose before that, it gets very stressful, Bryson. Very stressful, to the point where UCF could be one of the last four in, or one of the first four out. They might need some help. This has been a wacky week already. Michigan was upset by Penn State. That's a quality win UCF's not going to get, more than likely now. Mississippi State lost in the opening round of the SEC tournament. So there's just a lot of wild results going on in college softball, and you just don't want to get yourself in a situation where the committee decides your fate. And so the only way to do that for the Knights, I think, is to take care of business this week in the conference championship in Tampa. We will be there for that Memphis game, Bryce, and we'll have coverage on our YouTube channel, as well as on Twitter and on Instagram, Bryson. Part of our big coverage this week from Tampa.
Yes, it is we're going all out for this one. So basically, Nick and I are planning to...
Nick Porcelli, for those
right.
of you.
So are planning to give you as much all-access view of what we're doing out in USF as much as possible. You'll get to see us kind of go back and forth between track and softball, because Nick and I are going to be doing that. So you get to see a little bit of how the other half lives on the other side of the state. And then, of course, we'll post some highlights of plays that we see there, and a few recaps of the day. And then at the very end of everything, Nick and I are planning to assemble together a full vlog recapping the entire experience and showcasing, I would say the fun hecticness of everything, because 2 conference championships going on practically like on the same university grounds.
It's going to be wild. Yeah. It's going to be wild.
It's a wild thing. And as far as this softball tournament goes, Eric, I mean, looking at the awards and looking at this bracket here, I honestly think that while you don't want to UCF doesn't want to sit on their laurels, I think this is the half of the bracket that you would prefer UCF to be on, right? Because on the other side of the bracket that UCF would not see until the final is Wichita, for obvious reasons, Houston, who has 2 unanimous selections to the first team in Bree Cantu and Taria.
Yeah, and Taria Coleman, although UCF swept them, I actually, but you're right. They're dangerous with Kenneth Wilkie as pitcher. And then Tulsa is the other team in that bracket who actually beat UCF in Tulsa. They've been playing some good softball the last couple of weeks. So you're right. It's a tricky bracket there. But again, single elimination should be interesting to see. All the action will be on ESPN Plus. It'll be Ryan Urquhart and our good friend Francesca Anea, who's been my analyst for the last 3 seasons doing UCF games. She'll be the analyst on Thursday. UCF's very own Athletic Hall of Famer Allison Kime will be in the studio role with former USF Bull great Georgina Korick on the studio. Morgan Uber will be the sideline on Thursday, then host the pregame and postgame shows with Allison and Georgina Friday, Saturday. Tiffany Green and Aaron Miller will take it from there Friday, Saturday. The championship game's on the Deuce, 11 a.m. Eastern. Weather permitting, the semifinals would be at 12 and at 2:30. As of now, if UCF advances, they would play the second semifinal. All of it on ESPN Plus, championship game on ESPN 2 on that. Let's go over to track. Walk over, as we like to say, Bryson. Give us a thought. What should we look for this week from UCF track and field in the American Conference Championships?
So one of the reasons that the UCF took the indoor crown earlier on this spring is that they racked up a lot of points by just inundating the sprint events with UCF athletes, because this UCF team is deep in the sprinter category, headlined, of course, by the great Rayniah Jones. And Rayniah, and actually talking to Rayniah, which you can see on the Black and Gold Banneret YouTube channel, she actually talked about how that she really wants to have a full UCF final in sprint events. So if they do that, then that would certainly really help things a lot. And I think that would be very key in doing that, because in doing that, essentially you get all UCF athletes in the final, then you're going to block everybody else from getting points. And that's the big key in these conference championships, is you got to get a lot of points. And that's how you're able to do that. As far as everywhere else, Jasmine Scott-Kilgo and Ashira Collins headline the jumpers. Of course, you have Natalia Madison and Holly Cassels, who are going to be competing in the heptathlon. And then we have the distance runners who've actually been putting in some solid performances. Isabella Richardson and Penelope Sosa, of course, have been headliners, but Mariana Rodriguez has really come into her own this semester. I think I've seen her set PRs and raise herself up the event rankings multiple times this season. So, and of course, we have Adrienne Adams in the discus throw as well. She is one of the she looks like she is one of the premier discus throwers in the country at this point. So I would honestly give she's 11th in the country, by the way, Adrienne Adams, in the discus throw. So I would say that considering this team is also number 21 in the nation right now coming into this tournament, I think that they are definitely the odds-on favorites coming in. It's really just a matter of execution. And I think that as long as they can block that they can take as many points as they possibly can in the sprint events, then we could end up seeing another, I would say, large margin of victory. But again, the margin of victory is really going to come down to how many UCF sprinters can get into the finals. And hey, with the likes of Rayniah Jones, LaTasha Smith, Kyle Williams, Deja Lampkin, Beyonce DeFrayas, we could see that happen. So it'll be very interesting to watch and keep an eye on.
It will get going this week. And obviously the final, it'll all wrap up Sunday, right? Sunday night, right on there, that time frame for the track and field championships. We'll be awarding a champion.
So things will get started on Friday, May 12th at 11 a.m. with the heptathlon 100-meter hurdles and the hammer throw. So essentially, as long as inclement weather doesn't mess up the schedule like it is on Thursday, basically what's going to end up happening is we start at track at 11 a.m. Softball will be at 2:30, so that's going to be right around when the heptathlon 200-meter dash is happening.
Well, 12:30 now. Remember, it's been moved up to 12:30.
No, that's Friday. We're talking Friday.
Oh, Friday. All right. Well, for now, you're right. Friday.
Right. That's why I said for now. Friday is when the track stuff. So softball has the day to itself on Thursday, albeit earlier in the day. Friday, as things are scheduled right now, track will start the day at 11:30. At 11, softball will be at 2:30, and track will be going throughout the day until 7:55 when the 10,000 meter run starts. It's going to be after that. That's day one. On Saturday, things start a little later in the day. Most of the events start in the afternoon. Heptathlon still starts at 11 a.m. But a majority of the day's events are going to occur and relatively in the evening time. And then Sunday is when track and field has the day all to itself. So because of course the AAC Conference Softball Championship is on Saturday. On Sunday, it has the day all to itself. The action starts at 2:30 with the triple jump for women's on that day, and it will end at 8, and it will go throughout the afternoon and evening and end with the awards ceremony at 8:05. All of this action is going to be going down on ESPN Plus throughout the duration of the entire day. So if you have split screen, go ahead and put on some split screen, or if you have, or you can just pop on track, just check how things are going in between inning breaks at softball.
Say hello to us while we're there. We're going to be all over the place in that facilities on campus all week long. So that's the story from Tampa. Bryson, Nick, and I will be there. Bryson and Nick will be there the entire week. I'll be back and forth throughout the week on the softball end. Knights, of course, need some wins there. I think a trip to the final gets them in. They have quality wins over Ohio State, win over Louisville, win over Wichita State. We'll see how it goes. Michigan selection Sunday night, 7 o'clock for softball there. UCF golf. Let's quickly go to golf, Bryson. Their season came to an end Wednesday at the regionals. They were in position going into Wednesday to have a chance to be in the top 5 finish in the regionals up down there in South Florida. Where is it? Harbor?
Palm Beach Gardens. At the
Palm Beach Gardens. Yeah. Shelby Turnier's old stomping grounds, former UCF softball pitcher. They were in the mix of the top 5. They were grouped together with some of the USF players, but unfortunately did not work out, Bryson, for UCF. They didn't make the top 5 list, so their season comes to an end. A great season for Emily Marin and UCF Golf, but what kind of transpired for them?
It ended up just being a 12. Essentially, they shot a 12 over round in both the first and the third round. It was a course that played very tough the entire week. The first place team, Michigan State, finished at 8 over. That is how tough this course played the entire time. UCF was able to keep within 2 strokes of 5th place, which is what they needed to get to advance most of the time. Unfortunately, this third round, you just saw teams like LSU and Arkansas just have under par days, while UCF just had a similar experience to the first round, where they ended up shooting a 300 overall as a team. They ended up finishing 7th. So it's unfortunate they're not going to make it. However, I think there is some hope for the future of this team in the individual, and this is why. So UCF's highest finisher was junior Jess Baker, who finished at 1 over on the entire tournament. And keep in mind, only 5 golfers individually finished par or better. Jess Baker was just below that, so she finished tied for 6th. Solid positioning individually from her. She looks like, from as long as no transfer portal hooey happens, she is slated to be back as a senior for next season. And then you have true freshman Sandwich to suit them, finishing in the top 9 and tied for 19th at 5 over on the tournament. So solid performance from those two women who look like coming back next year would be kind of the center of this team that Emily Marin can then build around going forward. So it's unfortunate that it ends like this, because I think that this team was a very strong one coming in, but sometimes that's just how golf can be. Sometimes you just have a bad tournament, and enough of UCF's players had a bad tournament where they weren't able to make it up there with the rest of the team on what was already a very tough course. So it's a tough championship to make, and I think that it's still a good season as far as making the regional. Emily Marin has been doing that very consistently over the course of her career, and I think that the pieces are there for another solid run next year. So very well done. Just it's always tough when a season ends, unfortunately.
No doubt. Good year though for UCF women's golf and Emily Marin and company. They're tough in there in the regionals. We'll see what happens with track and field this week, as well as UCF softball. Bryson and I will be chatting around throughout the week. Make sure you follow us in your proper places. Eric Lopez, on my own Twitter. Bryson, where can they follow us and follow you?
So you can follow me at it's Bryson Turner on Twitter, and of course you can follow all of the action at UCF Banneret _SBN on Twitter. And don't forget to go to the Black and Gold Banneret YouTube channel, where we will try to upload the post-game content from both tournaments as fast as we possibly can. We are going to be in the field, and so if USF's Wi-Fi is anything like UCF's is notorious,
oh wow, yeah, don't remind me.
But we are going to try and get it up as soon as humanly possible. But you can also go on the YouTube channel right now and see some preview interviews that I did with track head coach Dana Boone, Rayniah Jones, and jumper Jasmine Scott-Kilgo.
And we'll have coverage all weekend from the softball as well. The American Conference Championships, the final one for UCF, as they look to try to go back-to-back conference tournament champions. The Knights trying to make it a 3rd straight championship game appearance. They got to win 2 games to do that. They will open with Memphis on Thursday. All right, for Bryson Turner, I'm Eric Lopez. This has been our preview. We'll see you in Tampa. More of Night Shift after this.
All right, welcome back. Jeff and Bryson with you here now. Thanks to Eric for filling us in as he goes back and forth between Tampa on the road. Night Shift podcast on the road. The road show's out. Back home for the moment before he heads back down to Tampa for the softball. Once again, Bryson with us. Hey, Bryson. We've got, first, real quick, I wanted to get in with baseball here because we just watched them come up. They're on the road for this long road trip out here. And so far they've split they've lost 3 of the 5 games on the road trip. They took 2 or 3 out of Tulane, down in New Orleans against Tulane. Lost 2-0 to Ohio State in Columbus. And then just a few moments ago, down in Dayton, lost to Greg Lovelady's old side, Wright State, 11-7. Once again, the bullpen just struggles for this team. They were up 5-1 after 3, and then they were up 6-2 heading into the bottom of the 6th, and then Wright State drops 7 runs on them in the bottom of the 6th, and that was pretty much the ball game right there. I think it has to be pretty, if you're Greg Lovelady, it has to be pretty frustrating to see how they're doing what they can. And I would love to see a breakdown of the starters versus the bullpen in terms of the overall stats here, because it's really hurting them right now. They're still above, 5 games above 500 at 27-22. And the only way they're going to get into the NCAA tournament is by winning the American. And this bullpen remains a question.
Honestly, it's funny because the pitching has been a very mixed bag. Either they were actually pretty good or actually really bad. In this case, the pitching ended up not being very good. In particular, Dom Stagliano has been having a bit of a rough go of it as of late against Wright State. He gave up 6 runs in 1.2 innings. And then in the Tulane series in game 2, where they lost via run rule, he ended up giving up 5 runs on 6 hits in a period of about 1.1 innings, and that's what led to Tulane running away with that game. Other than that, though, Tulane games 1 and 2 or 1 and 3, for instance, and the Ohio, even though they lost 2-0 to Ohio State, aside from that bottom of the first, it was actually they kept them scoreless throughout the rest of the game. So in some ways, I think that this is a little bit of an encouraging sign, because at least it means that some of the pitching is doing good. I just think that a few pitchers are having a bit of a rough go at it at the moment. And these midweeks, I think, and yes, you mentioned that they got to win the American. And so these midweek games really mostly serve as an indicator on where this team is. And so going into this Cincinnati series, obviously it's a very packed stretch for this team, but going into Cincinnati, now that it's a conference series, you'll be like, all right, you got to pull out the wins here so you can get as good a seed as possible in the conference tournament. But I think that the pitching is trending upwards, even if it's just a teeny bit. I think just a couple of individual pitchers just need to work out some of the kinks that they're in right now, and the better that they can look going into the conference tournament, the better.
The one bright spot, I think, on the pitching staff, has been Nazir Victor. He is through 18 appearances. He's made only 1 start, but he's 3-1 with an ERA of 2. That's best on the team, and a WHIP of 0.89. And he was showing some of that against Tulane earlier this week as well. It struck out 5 in 2 innings in his one appearance there. He hasn't actually allowed a run since April the 18th. So, even though, I'm looking back and I'm seeing, the starters, like you were saying, the 4 starters who've started the most games so far, Rudy Gomez, Dom Stagliano, Jacob Marlowe, and looking back through it, and Cam Leiter, they all have ERAs over 5. But at least with Victor, you got a little something going there. I wonder if he's not the guy who they may lean on come conference tournament time when they go down to Clearwater, especially in late game close situations. No?
Yeah, late game close situations. The back end of the bullpen, I think, is completely set. Kyle Kramer, I actually think, is probably going to go down as one of the better closing pitchers in this program's history, because already his total saves is getting up there. Then
he's got 8 saves this year, 31 in the third innings. You're right. I should give some props here to Kyle, because he's He struck out 48 of the 108 batters he's faced.
So between him and then having a setup man like Niger Victor, the back end of this bullpen is fine. The problem is that middle portion, because the starters, I actually think that they kind of they've been trying to work that out, I think, for a while. And Rudy is solid at Friday night. I think that that's not going to change going forward. Cam Leiter, though, he did have a bit of a resurgence on Sunday against Tulane, where he went 5 innings and got a career-high 11 strikeouts on the night. So he struck out half of the batters he faced. He faced 22 batters and struck out 11 of them. Now, he walked 6, so that's something that we've kind of seen from him, but he's a true freshman. That's something that they kind of have to work out with him. And honestly, I just feel like as far as pure stuff goes, I really think he's the best pitcher in this bullpen, if not the second best after Rudy Gomez. So,
well, I mean, that's what you get with a freshman, right? I mean, that outing you were talking about was 5 innings. That was the second longest outing of the season,
right?
Behind the 6 innings that he threw against Stetson. And like you said, he walked 6, but he struck out 11. That's a very true freshman-y kind of performance, right?
The good news is the walks were actually seemed to be pretty spread out, and that's really where you want to do it. If you walk maybe one batter an inning, then maybe you can win with that. But you just got to make sure you don't do it consecutively. And sometimes that's just what we've seen this team do sometimes, is walk multiple batters in an inning, and then someone gets a hit, and then boom, like 2 or 3 runs end up scoring. So, but you have the starters, and then you have the middle reliever part. We've seen Dom Stagliano come in this kind of middle reliefy type of environment in the past 2 appearances, and they just have not worked for the most part. For the most part, I feel like Stagliano, he's a starter. I don't know why they've moved him back there, but maybe it's because they did that with him earlier in the year. But I honestly think Stagliano is more served in the starting role, especially since they started Cameron Crane on Saturday and only went like 1.1 inning in like an opening pitcher type of situation. And how in the MLB we've seen that. So I think the biggest key that for Lovelady is that he just needs to really work out what is the best scenario to put this pitching staff in, so that way they're firing on high cylinders when we get to Clearwater.
Well, spinning it forward now to the more pressing business is 3 games at Cincinnati. They're staying in town, and then they face the Bearcats, who are 21 and 27 on the season. But along with UCF and Memphis are 8 and 10 in the conference, tied for 4th. And this is one of those things where, now you're really kind of up against it, and you need a really good series on the road, which is always a tough ask. I mean, even though Cincinnati has struggled in recent years, it's really tough to pull 2 or 3 on the road against a team that you're even with in the standings, especially late in the year when you're trying to figure out we're in a situation where things are kind of still a little bit more fluid. So, what's the story right now? What do you want to see from this team this weekend as they take on Cincinnati? Because they only have 7 games left in the season. Back home for Bethune-Cookman on Tuesday, and then 3 against Wichita to finish out the year at home, and then it's time for Clearwater. So it's crunch time now.
You got to work out that pitching staff. I think that is going to be the name of the game. I think the batters, for the most part, are fine. You may have the odd bad game like Ohio State. The batters just weren't really doing it in that one. But for the most part, the hitting is looking really good. Heck, Nick Romano managed to get a homer to kind of close it a little bit against Wright State. Didn't lead to a win, but the offense was able to work. The pitchers just didn't get any run support. So it's going to end up, I think we just really have to keep a close eye on the pitching to see if we get any kind of momentum going. This season is really reminding me of 2021, because this team is already kind of hovering around that 500 mark, which is around this point where they were then. And so I think if you're Lovelady, I think the goal is you want to make it to Clearwater above 500. Ideal. Now they're already like 27 and 22 right now.
Yeah.
So you have a little bit of
barring a real disaster that should happen, you would think.
Right, exactly. But again, like, sometimes you just want to have those small goals. You want to be able to keep above 500, and then you want to get your pitching in a position where you're confident with it, or at least you know what you're dealing with going into Clearwater. Do you have a general idea of what order you want to go to? What position do you want your pitcher to go in certain situations against a certain opponent, maybe once we get a little closer? So it's just been really trying to figure out this pitching staff throughout the entire season. I mean, beyond Rudy Gomez, it's just trying to figure out what do you do to start, and then in the middle of games, I mean, at least the back end is sorted, and man, they've needed them this year. Yeah. But yeah.
Well, I mean, here's the thing with UCF and Cincinnati. Believe it or not, when you look at the team stats in the American, UCF is 4th in the conference in team ERA behind ECU, Wichita, and Memphis. They're also 4th in the conference in team batting average at 285, and they're playing a team that is dead last in the conference in both those categories, team batting average and team ERA. And I think it's interesting that UCF with a team ERA of 5.43 is still in the top half of the league. So I think the real goal here is not so much staying above 500 in your overall record. I think the real goal is getting to 500 in conference. If you can go with 6 games left, you go 4-2. That means you, on average, took 2 out of 3 of your last 2 in each of your last 2 series. That gets you to 500. If you get above 500, that means that you swept somebody. So that's kind of where where I would if I were sitting in Greg Lovelady's office, I'd be thinking that's kind of like let's press for that, because that would get you over 30 wins for the season, above 500 in conference. And I think the other thing too is you're getting ready to play for seeding here. And as I look at the standings, I had them pulled up here for a second, but unfortunately I pulled them down. But as I look at the standings right here for baseball, all right, so remember the tournament is played in those 2 double elimination pods. And then the winners of those double elimination pods play each other in a winner-take-all game. Right now, UCF would be in a pod with number 1 Houston, number 5 Memphis, and number 8 South Florida. ECU, Wichita, Cincy, and Tulane would be in the other. And I actually wouldn't mind that one bit. I mean, you get a shot at Houston to kind of help yourself out. But if you fall down, there's something about that cluster of ECU, Wichita, and either Cincy or Tulane that kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies a little bit. Well, I mean, that's you're going to get a tough game from all those teams, no matter what. I think that if you in a double elimination situation, I wouldn't mind facing up against USF again. And if you have to fight your way back out of the loser side of the bracket, okay, face Memphis. All right. Maybe Cincinnati sneaks in there, but if UCF takes care of Cincinnati this weekend, it's not likely that would happen. In fact, they'd probably fall down below Tulane. But yeah, I think that's the real consideration right now is what do you want that little mini tournament that you're going to play to be? And the question is, do you want to play Houston? Personally, I would still rather play Houston in the double elimination side of the bracket as opposed to ECU, because ECU right now 35-14, they're 26-4 at home this year, and Houston is even though they're still hanging in there at 12-5 in the conference, they're still overall 28-19. By the way, Houston. Let's see, are they playing tonight? Yes, they're playing at Rice tonight. So, that'll give you kind of an idea of, we'll have an even better idea of what they're doing Actually, let me see. That game started at 6:30. I want to see if we could pull up some stats here, at least as of right now. But while we're recording this on Wednesday, Houston's up 6-3 on Rice. Okay, Rice scored 3 in the first, and Houston came back, scored 6 in the third. So, I'll take, given the choice, pick your poison. I'll take Houston right now. So, all right. That takes us over to track and field. They're actually competing for a conference championship this weekend. The outdoor conference championships for the American will take place starting Friday, May the 12th, and going through Sunday at USF in Tampa. UCF women's track and field team, of course, the reigning indoor champs in the American, and looking to close out their run in the AAC with an outdoor championship and try and pull the double. And Bryson Turner, you got some FaceTime with both head coach Dana Boone and a couple of key members of UCF's track team as they prepare for this one last conference meet.
Yes, I mentioned this in the previous segment with Eric, but to reiterate on the Black and Gold Banneret YouTube channel, you will find the videos of me speaking with UCF track head coach Dana Boone, track and field star Rayniah Jones, and jumper Jasmine Scott-Kilgo as they prepare to head down to Tampa. And both of them, I would say, are some of those athletes that I mentioned last week that are right around the top of their game going in, and that is an ideal position to be in a conference tournament environment.
Let's go ahead and listen to a brief clip from each of those interviews from all three of them. This is head coach. We'll start with head coach Dana Boone, and then Rayniah Jones and Jasmine Scott-Kilgo.
What does it mean to you guys be able to kind of weather the season in the top 25 the entire time?
I think it's a great accomplishment. It was something that as a staff we wanted to accomplish when we came here 5 years ago to see that into fruition. But the goal is, to be after the postseason still be a ranked team. So, but having the season ranking is definitely a trend in the right direction. So very, very proud of this team and the staff for all their hard work.
I think, for one, I like to mention that I do trust Coach Boone's ability to place me in whatever event that I need at that time. So for me, conference is always the 100 hurdles, and the 200. That's conference, that's period. It was very new for me to be on the 4x4 this year. I used to run it in high school. That was the first time in my collegiate career that I ran a 400, and I was very glad to be on the school record holders and to break it. So that was a new feeling. The feeling after the race was actually very horrible, but just being versatile, it makes me feel like there's nothing that I can't do, that doesn't mean I would do 800, but being able to just dally around in it, I just love having so much versatility and being able to fill in where my coach needs me.
Honestly, it feels amazing. I feel like everybody goes into their senior year like, oh, like this is it, like, and with a bang. And I just feel like that's exactly what's been happening for me this season. Like right from the get, like PRs, like record-breaking performance, like it was just like perfect, Yeah. And especially this being like my second year triple jumping, I was just like completely overjoyed. Like I knew it was coming, like because how good practice and stuff and everything was going. But I just was like, oh my gosh, like I'm so close. And then, the weekend after it was like, boom. And I was like, like I was just so happy. Oh my gosh, I can't even explain that feeling of like all your hard work, like paying off. Like it's an amazing feeling.
All right. For the full interviews that Bryson did with Coach Boone, along with Rayniah and Jasmine, make sure you hop over to our YouTube channel, Black and Gold Banneret on YouTube. Bryson, what are the events that you are going to be paying close attention to starting on Friday? Because they're going to be streaming this thing, I believe, on actually it's going to be where it's going to be ESPN Plus, right? So this will be pretty interesting to watch. There are some highlight events to keep an eye on here as UCF gets ready to go, starting right away on Friday.
Yes, so they're going to have the heptathlon to start out, but the big events that you really want to keep track of are the main sprint events. So the 100-meter dash, 100-meter hurdles, 200-meter dash, 400-meter dash. Those 4 events were key, or their indoor counterparts were key reasons why UCF won the American Athletic Conference Indoor Championship, because they essentially inundated the finals of those events with UCF runners. That was one of the reasons why UCF got as many points as they did. That's why they ended up winning the championship by as much as they did. So I think that that's honestly when I talked to Coach Boone, she mentioned that, you want to have each athlete do the best they can, and that basically means getting them to the final. And Rayniah, of course, mentioned that she would like to have an all UCF final, which honestly would be a very fun thing to see. But if they do that, then I think they're going to be in good shape for the most part. So what you're going to want to look out for is the 200-meter dash trials, which are happening at Friday at 7 p.m. That is going to be one to watch. That's probably going to be the main event to watch that day, I think, out of all of them. Then on Saturday, you have the 100-meter hurdles trials, so we get to see Rayniah Jones in action there. The 400-meter dash, and then the 100-meter dash. So Friday evening is going to be one to watch. The one to watch as well. And of course, Nick Porcelli and I are going to be in Tampa, keeping track of all of this. But if there's anything that I can tell you to keep an eye on now, is keep an eye on how many UCF athletes can make it into the final, because the more UCF athletes get in that final, the more points for UCF as a team, which means a better chance for UCF to come away with a 4th consecutive American track and field title.
Yeah. All right, and let me get Nick in here real quick too, because like you alluded to, Bryson, as we wrap up here on the show, this is going to be a busy weekend for all you guys in Tampa. So Bryson and Nick and Elo, who mentioned earlier, you all are going to be down there going back and forth between softball and track. So give us a preview of what you guys have in store this week.
So we're heading down tomorrow morning. We're going to be covering the first softball game against Memphis. Then Friday, that's when the track tournament starts. And at that point, that's when it gets crazy. It's going to be a free-for-all. We are literally going to be running back and forth between stadiums, checking out everything we can. We're both expecting both teams to go really far in this tournament. Hopefully they win them both. And no matter what happens, we're going to be covering them both. As you guys know, I used to live in Tampa, and I actually used to run on the USF campus, so it's going to be a little nostalgic for me. It's like I'm visiting my old running routes.
And you have particular insight here, and I want to see if we can get some of this before we go, Nick, because you as a runner, you understand the nuances of different facilities and different surfaces sometimes, and where the advantages are for certain runners. You as a distance runner in particular, if you can give us a little bit of insight into the facility at South Florida and how it differs from UCF, and where there might be some advantages or disadvantages for UCF, and some of the things that the Knights have to look out for.
So to be honest, the track at USF is almost pretty similar to the one here. I've ran on that track a couple times during training. I actually got kicked out one time because they left the door open and I wasn't supposed to be there. That's a real story. But honestly, the only real advantage I can think of is just that this is a team that's going to have to travel and they can't sleep in their own bed, because really, other than like the stands, which doesn't really have an effect on, the actual running product, it's pretty much the same thing. Like it's another part of Florida, so weather's going to be the same. Track is almost exactly the same. It really shouldn't be too much of a difference, other than they're just not getting to sleep in their own bed.
Friday in Tampa, we're looking at a 40% chance of rain. It's going to be hot. It's going to be in the 90s. Saturday, 50% chance of rain, high again in the 90s. Sunday, it should be rather nice, just a 20% chance of rain as well. So it might be humid. I think that's the other thing. And the thing is with some of these track meets is that the delays are a real pain.
For the distance runners, yeah, that's really going to suck. It sucks to run in the humidity, but at the same time, that everything you just said, that's pretty much just a normal day in Florida. So
right,
hopefully they're used to it. They'll be ready. I have faith in them.
All right, so make sure you follow us on the Instagram account. You guys will be kind of doing a little bit of streaming here and there from there as well, as we go between softball and track in Tampa this weekend. So, and by the way, huge thanks to you guys. This should be fun. You guys go there. Make sure you have a lot of fun out there because it's fun. I loved covering track and field. One time, I was able to cover the Conference USA track meet when UCF was in Conference USA. And hosted it. That was a real blast. It was like a little mini Olympics, and I really enjoyed it. It was just a fun convention of people. So we're going to be watching that. We're going to be keeping an eye on baseball at Cincinnati, of course. ELO at softball in Tampa for the American Athletic Conference Championship. UCF gets underway against the Memphis Tigers, the 7 seed, on Thursday at 12:30. Remember, that's been moved up because they're concerned about that weather. And weather always seems to be an issue with the AAC softball and baseball sometimes championships as well. So that's something we're going to have to look at. And this, by the way, this is going to be UCF playing Memphis for a 4th consecutive time after beating them 3 in a row to close out the regular season. So thanks again to Elo at Eric Lopez Elo. Make sure you follow him for all the latest. Bryson's at It's Bryson Turner. Nick is at Nick Porcelli 2. Also, thanks again to Drew, Statboy Drew, for breaking things down. And thanks to Kyle as well, the SOTG for the student of the game, for getting us on board with Rannell Hall. Best of luck to Rannell this week in the XFL Championship game in San Antonio, where he will ostensibly be returning kicks for the Arlington Renegades. We know who we're rooting for in that game in particular. So that'll do it for us here on the Night Shift Podcast. Make sure you follow us, UCF Banner _SBN on Twitter. Follow me at Jeff_Sharon. Thanks to all you guys. And one last thing, get well, Kyle. He hasn't been feeling too well of late. Kyle, we're thinking about you. Feel a little bit better as we head into this weekend. Enjoy yourself as we have plenty of UCF sports to cover for you this weekend. For all of us here on the Night Shift Podcast, I'm Jeff Sharon saying thank you so much for listening. Have a great weekend. Go Knights. Charge on.